New research is raising red flags about decaf coffee. Groups are petitioning the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to ban a key chemical used to remove caffeine.
From mold toxins to pesticide residue and even trace amounts of heavy metals, certain U.S. coffee brands have been found to contain substances that don't just pass through your body, but slowly build up over time.
They create, in some people, concern that there's something lurking in places and they don't know what it is.
Coffee in moderation has been shown to potentially decrease the risk of certain cancers and potentially to have some heart benefit.
This is crazy because the companies selling it know what's going into those bags and pods. Join us in these videos as we expose the 8 coffee products that are slowly poisoning your system and you must avoid. Number 1. Dunkin' Coffee. Dunkin' built an empire on coffee and donuts. The grocery store version promises that same familiar Dunkin' experience at home. But testing has raised questions about quality and contamination. Laboratory analysis has reportedly found toxin A in some samples at concerning levels. Mold contamination can occur during growing, drying, or storage, especially when quality control standards are inconsistent. Industry critics argue that large commercial brands sometimes accept bean lots that specialty or premium roasters would reject. That difference in standards matters. Pesticide testing has also detected residues consistent with large-scale industrial farming. Not vague traces, but measurable levels indicating heavy chemical use during cultivation. That means every cup may carry remnants of how those beans were grown. Dunkin' relies heavily on Robusta beans in many of its blends to control costs. The brand markets this as a bold flavor profile. But bold often translates to bitter and harsh. High-quality Arabica beans, when carefully roasted, don't need excessive bitterness to taste strong. Harshness usually comes from lower-grade beans and darker, more aggressive roasting meant to mask defects. Bold can sometimes be code for cost-cutting. There's also the issue of packaging. Ground coffee is highly sensitive to oxygen. Once exposed, it begins losing freshness quickly, developing stale or flat flavors within weeks of roasting. If packaging doesn't limit oxygen effectively, quality declines long before the coffee reaches your cup. The result? A product built for scale and brand recognition, not necessarily for purity, freshness, or premium sourcing. Dunkin' coffee can sit on grocery store shelves for months. By the time it makes its way into your cart, it may already be stale and oxidized. Freshness matters with coffee. Once roasted, beans gradually lose flavor and beneficial compounds. Oxygen, light, and time all work against quality. Former employees have also suggested that the packaged coffee sold in grocery stores is not identical to what's brewed in Dunkin' locations. In-store coffee is often fresher and handled differently. Grocery store versions are typically produced through licensing agreements, where large-scale production and margin efficiency can take priority over cafe-level freshness. Testing has shown that some packaged Dunkin' products contain lower antioxidant levels compared to certain specialty brands. Extended shelf life, aggressive roasting, and lower-cost bean sourcing can all reduce beneficial compounds. What you're often left with is caffeine and potentially trace contaminants, but fewer of the natural antioxidants associated with freshly roasted, high-quality coffee. At $9 to $13 per bag, Dunkin' sits in the mid-range price category. You're paying for a recognizable name, but the quality may not match the branding. What would you prefer? A brand that is cheap and low quality, or the other way round? Who's next on our avoidance list? This one might break your heart. Number 2. Biohazard. If the name sounds a little alarming, that's kind of the point. Biohazard is clearly a nod to how much caffeine this coffee packs, and trust us to get to that in a second. Biohazard coffee, based in New York, is similar in concept to Death Wish coffee, which you might already know. Back in 2016, Death Wish famously won a Super Bowl ad spot, which really put ultra-high caffeine coffee on the map. Since then, a number of competitors have entered the world's strongest coffee space, and Biohazard is one of them. Like Death Wish, Biohazard claims to be the world's strongest coffee. They say it's lab-tested. What's not entirely clear is how many other brands it was tested against, or whether it was directly compared to Death Wish. But here's what is clear. The caffeine content is massive. Biohazard states that a 12-ounce cup contains 900 to 28 milligrams of caffeine. For context, that's about 4 times the caffeine in a typical cup of coffee from your local barista. The bag even says it contains 4 times the caffeine of regular coffee, and jokes that it may lead to overproductivity, all-nighters, and the occasional feeling of invincibility. It is a dark roast and comes pre-ground. Biohazard, like Death Wish, leans heavily on Robusta beans. Robusta is generally considered the less refined cousin to Arabica. If you walk into a specialty cafe or even a big chain like Starbucks or Pete's, you're almost always drinking Arabica. Robusta, on the other hand, is more common in mass-produced coffee. Why? Because it's easier to grow. Robusta plants are more resistant to pests and disease. They produce higher yields. They're tougher. From a farming standpoint, they make a lot of sense. From a flavor standpoint, that's where opinions shift. Robusta is often described as harsher, more bitter, less nuanced than Arabica. But it does have one big advantage: higher caffeine content. And that's the whole strategy here. Use 100% Robusta. Maximize caffeine. Market it as the strongest coffee in the world. Medical experts, including those at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, say caffeine can absolutely fit into a healthy diet for most people. But there's a line, and crossing it can lead to unwanted side effects. How much is too much isn't the same for everyone. Body weight, medications, underlying health conditions, pregnancy, and even simple individual sensitivity all influence how caffeine affects you. Some people can drink multiple cups of coffee without a second thought. Others feel jittery, anxious, or wide awake for hours after just one serving. That's why it's important to pay attention not just to how much caffeine you're consuming, but also to how your body responds. For most healthy adults, the FDA points to 400 milligrams per day, roughly the amount in 2 to 3 12-ounce cups of coffee, as a level not generally associated with negative effects. Still, people metabolize caffeine at very different speeds. If you're pregnant, trying to become pregnant, breastfeeding, or taking certain medications, it's wise to talk with a healthcare provider about whether you should limit your intake. When it comes to children and teenagers, the guidance becomes much stricter. The American Academy of Pediatrics advises against energy drinks for young people because of their high caffeine and sugar content. In kids and teens, too much caffeine can lead to increased heart rate, heart palpitations, elevated blood pressure, anxiety, trouble sleeping, digestive issues, and dehydration. The dietary guidelines for Americans recommend avoiding caffeine altogether for children under 2 years old and encouraging healthier beverage choices for older children and teens, mainly water, unsweetened low-fat or fat-free milk, fortified soy beverages, and limited amounts of 100% juice. What other brand has been flagged as harmful? Keep watching to find out. Number 3. The Folgers brand. Popular as America's best-selling coffee brand for generations, Folgers has dominated grocery store shelves with its iconic red container and bold promises of mountain-grown quality. But what's really inside that can? Independent testing tells a very different story. Lab results show that Folgers contains some of the highest levels of contaminants found among major coffee brands. Researchers detected significant amounts of ochratoxin A, a toxic compound produced by mold that can grow on coffee beans during processing and storage. And here's the troubling part. In the United States, there are no legal limits for ochratoxin A in coffee. That means companies can sell coffee containing this toxin without breaking any laws. No limits. No consequences. Now, here's why that matters. Ochratoxin A doesn't simply pass through your system. It builds up over time. It tends to accumulate in kidney tissue, where it can cause long-term, even permanent damage. So, if contaminated coffee is part of your daily routine, that means repeated exposure to a toxin your body struggles to eliminate. Testing also found pesticide residues. Many of the beans are sourced from large industrial farms that rely heavily on chemical agriculture. Herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, sprayed throughout the growing season, and traces of those chemicals can make their way into your cup. Industrial farming practices don't disappear once the beans are roasted. There's also the issue of bean quality. Folgers primarily uses Robusta beans, a cheaper variety that produces higher yields but naturally contains more bitterness and, in some cases, higher contaminant levels than Arabica beans. Robusta is less expensive to grow, so companies often blend it with small amounts of Arabica to reduce costs while still marketing the product as quality coffee. The roasting process is another factor. Large-scale brands often prioritize speed and volume. High-temperature roasting allows them to process more coffee quickly. But extreme heat can destroy beneficial antioxidants while concentrating certain harmful compounds. So by the time it reaches your cup, much of the potential benefit is gone, while unwanted substances remain. Former food scientists have noted that consistency and low production costs are often the primary goals. To achieve that, beans from multiple sources are blended together to create the same flavor profile year after year. That can mean mixing higher quality beans with lower quality or contaminated batches to meet pricing targets. At $8 to $12 per container, Folgers presents itself as simple, affordable, everyday coffee. But look a little closer. You may be drinking coffee made from some of the cheapest beans available. Beans that can carry mycotoxins or pesticide residues, then roasted in ways that reduce much of the natural antioxidant content. That's not real value. That's paying for a red can and a familiar name. What does this say about the integrity of the brands that we love the most? What's the next coffee brand to avoid? Keep watching to find out. Number 4. The Maxwell House brand. Maxwell House, based on what we know, has been a long-standing American coffee brand. Its slogan, "Good to the last drop," has been around for more than a century. It's trusted, recognizable, and familiar, but it's more. Based on independent testing, results suggest the concerns look very similar to Folgers, just in a different colored container. Independent lab analysis has detected ochratoxin A in some Maxwell House samples. In certain cases, the reported levels would exceed regulatory limits set by the European Union, which has stricter standards for mycotoxins in coffee. Legal in the US, restricted in parts of Europe. The pesticide findings are also comparable to Folgers. Both brands typically source from large-scale industrial farms that rely heavily on chemical-intensive agriculture. Testing has detected residues from multiple pesticides, including some that are restricted in other countries, but still used in certain coffee-growing regions. Then there's the bean choice. Maxwell House relies heavily on Robusta beans to keep production costs down. Robusta is cheaper to grow and produces higher yields, but it's also harsher and more bitter than Arabica. To smooth that out, companies often blend in small amounts of Arabica and use darker, more aggressive roasting. The bitterness gets masked, but so do the defects. Aggressive roasting can make lower-grade beans taste uniform, while also reducing beneficial compounds like antioxidants and polyphenols that fresh, high-quality coffee naturally contains. By the time it reaches your cup, much of what made coffee beneficial may be significantly reduced. Former employees have even suggested that Maxwell House and Folgers operate under nearly identical systems. Similar sourcing, similar processing methods, similar quality targets, just marketed differently. Different label, different story. Very similar coffee. In the end, you may not be paying for better quality. You're paying for branding. Testing has also detected acrylamide in Maxwell House coffee. Acrylamide is a chemical that forms naturally when foods, including coffee beans, are roasted at high temperatures. It's classified as a probable human carcinogen. And here's the key point. The more aggressive the roasting process, the higher acrylamide levels can rise. Maxwell House, priced at the same $8 to $12 range as Folgers, ends up offering much of the same trade-off. Possible mycotoxin presence, detectable pesticide residues, cost-driven Robusta heavy blends, processing methods that reduce beneficial compounds while increasing unwanted ones. Different label, similar concerns. Between cost reduction and the health of consumers, what should these brands be prioritizing? What other brands have become dangerous coffee brands? Keep watching to find out. Number 5. 8 o'clock coffee. 8 o'clock coffee has been around since 1859 and promotes itself as one of America's original gourmet coffee brands. But modern testing raises familiar questions. Independent analyses have detected mycotoxins in some samples at levels that have drawn scrutiny. As with many large-scale brands, beans are sourced from multiple suppliers, and when quality standards vary, so can contamination risk. 8 o'clock markets its products as primarily Arabica. However, some testing and industry analysis suggest blends may include notable Robusta content to maintain competitive pricing. Pesticide screening has also identified residues consistent with conventional, chemical-intensive farming methods. The roast profile typically sits in the middle, not light enough to preserve maximum antioxidants, not dark enough to deliver the bold flavor profile some consumers prefer. It can mask certain bean defects while still reducing beneficial compounds. Neither the bright complexity of a light roast, nor the signature intensity of a carefully crafted dark roast. At $8 to $12 per bag, 8 o'clock's pricing aligns with other mainstream brands, and reported contamination levels appear comparable to brands like Folgers and Maxwell House. The classic vintage-style packaging suggests heritage and craftsmanship, but behind it, production remains largely cost-focused. If they improved quality, would profit be reduced? What's the true cost of sacrificing quality for profit? Let's find out what other brands needs avoidance. Number 6. Walmart's Great Value Coffee. Great Value is Walmart's in-house brand, covering thousands of everyday products. The coffee sits at the very bottom of the price range, often the cheapest option on the shelf. And with coffee, price can reflect sourcing and quality control. Independent testing has reportedly found higher levels of ochratoxin A in some samples compared to many other mainstream brands. Ochratoxin A is a mycotoxin linked to mold growth during improper drying or storage. Lower-cost supply chains can increase the risk of inconsistent quality control, especially when beans are sourced strictly based on price. Pesticide screening has also detected residues consistent with intensive, large-scale farming practices. These aren't boutique, small lot beans grown under tightly monitored specialty standards. They're commodity-grade beans, produced for volume and cost efficiency. Great value blends are often heavily Robusta-based. Robusta is cheaper to cultivate and produces higher yields, but it tends to have a harsher, more bitter flavor profile than Arabica. It also naturally contains more caffeine, that sharp bitterness many people notice. It often comes from lower-grade beans paired with aggressive roasting. Production is typically outsourced to large contract manufacturers. When contracts are awarded based primarily on cost efficiency, consistency can vary from batch to batch. Some lots may taste flat. Others are overly bitter. Quality control at this price point is rarely built around refinement. It's built around affordability. Industry insiders have long noted that store-brand products are engineered to meet strict target price points. That can mean accepting lower-grade beans, prioritizing yield over sourcing transparency, and streamlining processing to reduce costs. Testing has also shown that some low-cost coffees contain reduced antioxidant levels compared to specialty or freshly roasted alternatives. Lower-grade beans and extended storage can both reduce beneficial compounds over time. At $5 to $8 per container, great value is undeniably affordable. But affordability can come with trade-offs. Higher reported mycotoxin levels in some tests, detectable pesticide residues, Robusta heavy blends, reduced freshness, and antioxidant content. You're paying less. The question is whether you're comfortable with what that lower price may represent. At the lowest price points, quality compromises become more likely. Cheap coffee isn't magic. It's cheaper for a reason. Who's next, and why? Let's find out. Number 7. Starbucks packaged coffee. Starbucks is almost synonymous with premium coffee culture. The grocery store bags promise to bring that same cafe experience into your home. But packaged coffee and cafe coffee are not always the same product. Independent testing has detected ochratoxin A in some Starbucks packaged varieties. While levels vary between batches and products, the presence of mycotoxins shows that premium pricing does not automatically guarantee purity. Higher price does not equal cleaner coffee. Former employees have reported that grocery store products are often produced through separate supply chains or divisions, sometimes under licensing agreements. While the brand name is the same, sourcing and quality control processes may differ from what's used for in-store beverages. Then there's the roast profile. Starbucks is known for its signature dark roast. Dark roasting creates a bold, smoky flavor that many customers associate with the brand. But extremely dark roasting can also mask defects in lower quality beans. When coffee is roasted to the edge of char, it becomes difficult to taste the bean's original characteristics, good or bad. Dark roasting isn't inherently harmful, but it can reduce certain antioxidants and increase compounds like acrylamide, which naturally form during high-temperature roasting. Again, the core issue isn't just flavor. It's whether the product inside the bag truly reflects the premium image printed on the label. When coffee is roasted very dark, much of its original character disappears. Subtle flavor differences between high-grade and lower-grade beans become harder to detect. In other words, extremely dark roasting can make many coffees taste similar, regardless of bean quality. Testing has also shown that darker roasts tend to contain higher levels of acrylamide compared to lighter roasts. Acrylamide forms naturally during high-temperature roasting, and the longer and hotter the roast, the more of it can develop. So ironically, customers paying premium prices for darker roasts may be exposed to higher levels of this compound. Then there's packaging and freshness. The bags used for grocery store Starbucks coffee are similar to other mainstream brands. Once opened, Oxygen begins breaking down flavor compounds almost immediately. Without careful storage, the coffee can lose freshness within a few weeks. Starbucks also blends beans from multiple regions to maintain a consistent flavor profile year-round. Blending itself isn't unusual, many companies do it, but it can mean combining higher-grade beans with lower-grade lots to meet pricing targets. What you're buying isn't a single-origin premium selection. It's a blend engineered for consistency and margin. At $10 to $16 per bag, Starbucks grocery store coffee sits firmly in the premium price tier. Yet testing suggests that price does not eliminate concerns like potential mycotoxin presence, higher acrylamide levels from darker roasting, blended sourcing that may include lower-grade beans. The brand name alone doesn't automatically guarantee cafe-level quality. You've got to be sure of what you're pouring into your system. Who's next on our list? Let's see. Number 8. McCafe Grocery Store Version Coffee. McCafe is McDonald's retail coffee brand, sold in grocery stores. The association with McDonald's creates expectations of consistency, familiarity, and value. But grocery store coffee and restaurant coffee are not always identical products. Independent testing has detected ochratoxin A in some McCafe packaged varieties. In certain cases, reported levels would face tighter restrictions in regions with stricter mycotoxin regulations. When sourcing is built around strict cost targets, suppliers may prioritize volume and price over specialty-grade selection. That doesn't automatically mean unsafe, but it can increase variability in bean quality. Lower price requirements often mean wider sourcing pools, and wider sourcing pools can mean inconsistent quality control. Pesticide screening has also detected residues consistent with conventional, chemical-intensive farming practices. Some of the chemicals identified are restricted or banned in parts of Europe, but still permitted in certain coffee-producing regions. That doesn't make them illegal, but it does raise questions for consumers who assume global standards are the same everywhere. McCafe blends are typically Robusta heavy. Robusta costs less, delivers more caffeine, and produces a sharper, more bitter profile. That bitterness is often marketed as strong because many mass-market consumers associate bold flavor with strength. In large-scale commercial roasting, consistency matters more than nuance. Automated, high-volume roasting systems aim to standardize flavor across millions of bags. But machines can't perfectly adjust for natural variations between bean batches. The result? Some beans may be underdeveloped. Others were slightly over-roasted. Blending smooths it out, but it also masks inconsistency. Former suppliers have suggested that the packaged grocery store version differs from what's brewed in McDonald's restaurants. In-store coffee is often fresher and handled differently, while retail products are produced under licensing agreements with separate production standards. Testing has also shown that darker, high-temperature roasting can increase acrylamide levels, a compound that naturally forms during roasting and is classified as a probable human carcinogen. Some analyses suggest that certain McCafe packaged products contain elevated levels compared to lighter roasted alternatives. Higher heat, higher formation of certain compounds. At $7 to $11 per bag, McCafe positions itself as a value option, not ultra-cheap, not premium. But again, the pattern remains consistent across many large-scale brands. Cost-driven sourcing, Robusta-heavy blends, industrial farming inputs, high-volume roasting, variable contaminant levels depending on batch. The logo may signal familiarity, but familiarity doesn't automatically equal higher quality. But here's the reality. Many of the coffees we've discussed, from Folgers to McCafe, are made from lower-grade beans, roasted inconsistently, and sometimes contain elevated levels of harmful compounds. A familiar brand name doesn't automatically guarantee higher quality or safer coffee. So, which coffee brands can you actually trust? How'd we get to this point where coffee is no longer just something to be enjoyed, but something to be careful about? Let's see. The coffee boom. In the early 20th century, coffee production became a powerful magnet for immigrants looking for better economic opportunities. Large numbers of Portuguese, Italian, Spanish, German, and Japanese nationals arrived to work in the growing coffee economy. Coffee comes from the berries of shrubs in the genus Coffea. While there are several species, two dominate commercial production: Coffea arabica and Coffea canephora, better known as Robusta. Coffea arabica is widely considered the higher quality species. It originated in the southwestern highlands of Ethiopia, as well as parts of southeastern Sudan and northern Kenya. Coffea canephora, or Robusta, comes from western and central sub-Saharan Africa, stretching from Guinea to Uganda and southern Sudan. Other, less commonly grown species include Coffea liberica, Coffea stenophylla, Coffea mauritiana, and Coffea racemosa. All coffee plants belong to the Rubiaceae family. They are evergreen shrubs or small trees that can grow up to 5 meters or 15 feet tall if left unpruned. Their leaves are dark green, glossy, and oval-shaped, typically about 10 to 15 centimeters long. A defining feature of this plant family is the fused leaf structures at the base, known as interpetiolar stipules. Coffee plants produce clusters of fragrant white flowers that bloom at the same time. After flowering, small oval berries develop. These berries start out green, turn yellow, then red as they ripen, and finally black when dried. Inside most berries are 2 seeds, the coffee beans we know. However, about 5 to 10% of berries contain only 1 seed. These are called pea berries. Ripening time varies by species. Arabica berries typically mature in 6 to 8 months. Robusta berries take a little longer, about 9 to 11 months. There's also a key difference in how these plants reproduce. Arabica plants mostly self-pollinate. As a result, their offspring are usually very similar to the parent plant. Robusta and Liberica plants cannot self-pollinate. They require cross-pollination, which creates more genetic variation. Because of this, Robusta and Liberica are often propagated through cuttings, grafting, or budding to preserve desirable traits. At the same time, their genetic diversity offers more room for developing new strains and hybrids. In short, while all coffee comes from the same plant family, the species differ in origin, growth patterns, reproduction, and ultimately, the coffee they produce. Coffee is almost always sold roasted. Aside from a few rare drinks made with green coffee beans, the beans are roasted before anyone brews them. Sometimes suppliers roast the coffee before selling it. Other times, people roast the beans at home. Roasting is what truly transforms coffee. As the beans heat up, they change, physically and chemically. Moisture evaporates, so the beans lose weight. At the same time, they expand in size, which makes them less dense. That drop in density affects how strong the brewed coffee tastes and even how it needs to be packaged. The real magic begins when the internal temperature of the bean hits around 200 degrees Celsius. From there, things move quickly. Starches start breaking down into simple sugars. Those sugars brown through a process called caramelization, which deepens the bean's color. This is why light roasts are tan and dark roasts are deep brown, almost black. As roasting continues, sucrose, also called natural sugar, rapidly decreases, and in dark roasts it can disappear almost completely. Aromatic oils and acids begin to change, reshaping the flavor. Then, at about 205 degrees Celsius, new oils develop. One key compound, caffeol, forms around 200 degrees Celsius. It plays a major role in creating coffee's signature aroma and flavor. Interestingly, despite what many people assume, the caffeine difference between light and dark roasts is very small, only about 0.1%. The strength difference people notice usually comes from flavor intensity and brewing style, not caffeine levels. In short, roasting is where coffee becomes coffee. Heat reshapes the bean, unlocks aroma, builds flavor, and defines whether your cup tastes bright and light or dark, bold, and smoky. So, what's next for consumers and these harmful brands of coffee? Keep watching to find out. The U.S. coffee brand to avoid. Independent lab tests have uncovered results that may make you rethink every brand sitting in your pantry. We're talking about coffee contaminated with ochratoxin A, a mold-derived toxin linked to kidney damage and classified as a possible human carcinogen. Coffee is grown with heavy pesticide use, leaving chemical residues behind in every brew. Coffee is processed so aggressively that beneficial antioxidants are stripped away, while harmful compounds become more concentrated. Yes, possible carcinogens in your daily cup. The 8 major brands we explored tonight all show issues with mycotoxin contamination, pesticide residues, too much caffeine, and lower-grade beans. Regular consumption means these contaminants can slowly accumulate in your body over time. Choosing coffee that is tested, transparently sourced, and carefully roasted isn't just about taste, it's about health. When you drink Folgers or Maxwell House, you may be ingesting ochratoxin A and pesticide residues. When you drink Dunkin or Starbucks packaged coffee, you're getting potential mycotoxins and acrylamide formed during aggressive roasting. When you drink community coffee or 8 o'clock, you may be consuming contaminated beans marketed as premium. With great value, testing shows some of the highest mycotoxin levels of any brand, and McCafe grocery store coffee doesn't meet the in-store quality standards McDonald's promises. What do you think about these 8 U.S. coffee brands you must avoid? What's your take on the prioritization of profit over quality? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for joining us as we looked through and exposed the harmful practices of these coffee brands. We hope you found this video both shocking and eye-opening. We also hope those brands do not get featured as much as before on your pantry. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video on your screen to explore more shocking revelations. See you there.